All right, everybody, good morning. We are recording. Welcome to Intuitive Eating for the Whole Family. I am going to talk with you for 25 minutes and then leave about 20 minutes for Q&A. This is my free monthly masterclass designed to give you just a taste of the kind of coaching and workshop facilitation that I do. So I'm Limor Ellman, and I am a certified intuitive eating counselor. My coaching practice is Family Food Freedom, where I coach women and their families to reject dieting and embrace intuitive eating. I am also fat. I call myself fat because my goal is to destigmatize that word. Fat is merely a neutral descriptor. And I am so proud to be part of a movement of people who are reclaiming the word. Fat does not automatically mean I'm bad or unhealthy. Not that that really matters, actually, even the unhealthy part. So I consider this talk and my coaching essentially eating disorder prevention. Dieting is a gateway to eating disorders. Unfortunately, eating disorders are on the rise and affect children at a younger and younger age every year because dieting is a huge part of our culture. You're going to hear me define diet culture shortly. So just a few administrative things. I want you to know that I am not a substitute for medical care or mental health care. And I have a workbook for you, and I am going to give you that workbook right now. I'm going to put it in the chat. I like workbooks better than PowerPoint slides because then we can see each other. So follow along in the workbook. And if you wouldn't mind putting the location that you're in and the age of your kids in the chat so that we can get to know that part of you. And I'll also be sending a recording of this along with an electronic copy of the workbook. Did the workbook work? Excellent. So this is a preview essentially of what I do during my one-on-one coaching sessions. My signature offers are either 3 or 6 month packages. I'm going to put my website in the chat as well. All right, so let's get started. So I have a quiz that actually we're going to start with first. I'm not going to give you time to, you can take it while I'm talking. But I don't want to take up the time to wait for you guys to take it. But this is how do you know if you're raising intuitive eaters quiz? Did that work? Yay. All right. So let me get going. So today I'm going to talk about intuitive eating and talk to you about some of the thought leaders, some of the trailblazers who have models that I follow and whose models have literally changed my life. I'm going to start with intuitive eating and then transition into authoritative parenting and how it works beautifully with intuitive eating. And then I'll talk about the division of responsibility, which is Ellen Satter's model. And we'll come together after all of that with a greater understanding of how we can have an intuitive eating family with work and with patience and with commitment and time. So intuitive eating is an approach to eating that focuses on honoring your hunger, feeling your fullness, and finding satisfaction with food. The goal of intuitive eating is to become the expert of your body and to develop body trust. And you do this by tapping into your inner cues and rejecting external messages like food rules and really diet culture. We are all born with the right to eat intuitively, but over time, this right gets snatched away thanks to diet culture. When a baby is born, they know when to push away the nipple or the bottle when they're full, and when they're hungry because they're screaming. And so over time, though, these internal messages that are natural gets taken away by diet culture, by external messages. And intuitive eating essentially is a personal experience because nobody can tell you what it feels like in your body, what fullness and hunger feel like. Only you know that. What your food tastes and preferences are, only you know that. By removing the obstacles to body attunement, you can become an intuitive eater. It's about shifting from self-control, from a mindset of self-control to self-care. Becoming more attuned with your body's sensations is self-care. And if I were to argue it, I would say it is a foundation of self-care. So the 10 steps of intuitive eating were written by two nutritionists, Elise Resch and Evelyn Tribole, who saw actually that their patients were not responding to food plans in their traditional nutrition practice. This is about 30 years ago. And they saw that their patients wanted to lose weight. They put them on diets, but they never kept it off. And they couldn't understand why. And then they realized it was because they were listening to external messages. And they wrote this book that, in my mind, transformed the world of nutrition. So intuitive eating for the whole family means understanding the 10 principles and adopting them to your family. But the most important first step is understanding these principles and trying them yourself. The best parenting tool, is modeling. All right, so I'd like you to turn to page 2 in your workbook. And those who came late, I put the workbook link in the chat. Do you see that? If you could give me a thumbs up. If you don't, I could put it in again. I'm not sure if do you see that there? Alana and Phoebe, great. So diet culture we're on page 2 of the workbook. Really important that you understand the definition of diet culture. So diet culture is systemic oppression. Diet culture is a system of oppression that worships thinness and equates it to health and moral virtue, which means you can spend your whole life thinking you're not good enough because you have not achieved that impossibly thin ideal. That was me. I never achieved the thin ideal. And so I always thought there was something wrong with me. But then I realized about 4 or 5 years ago that it actually wasn't me. It was diet culture. And I was being oppressed. Diet culture promotes weight loss as a means of getting superior in status. It means that you're compelled to spend an enormous amount of your time, your energy, your money, your resources trying to lose weight, even though the research is so clear that dieters regain the weight in 2 to 5 years, and 2/3 of dieters gain even more weight. We have tons of studies. I think there are like 50 studies that show us that that dieting is impossible, essentially, to achieve. My feeling is that the 2% of people who actually maintain their weight loss are probably doing so with some disordered relationship to food. Diet culture demonizes certain ways of eating while elevating others. All right. And so you become super concerned with what you're eating, how much food you're eating. You become shameful of your choices at restaurants or whatever it is. And you essentially become distracted from your own power, your own purpose. Diet culture oppresses people who don't match up to its supposed picture of health, which disproportionately harms women, femmes, trans folks, people in larger bodies, people of color, people with disabilities, and the list goes on. In order to raise intuitive eaters, you have to truly accept that dieting does not work and that dieting is harmful. Diet culture does whatever it can to teach you the opposite, to tell you that your authentic self is damaged. It is diet culture and the giant industries everywhere that are convincing us that our bodies are bad. I want to move on to intuitive eating on page 3 and 4. All right. So there are 10 principles of intuitive eating. I'm not going to go through all the principles because it is a lot of information. So you can please read those principles at your leisure now. But I'm going to go through some of them that I think are most important when you are trying to implement intuitive eating in your home. Honoring your hunger and feeling your fullness. Oh, and by the way, these are steps. These are not steps that are necessarily to be taken in order. And the authors of this model make that very clear because in diet culture, diets and food plans have steps. This is nothing like that. This is an approach to eating that helps you tap into your natural body's cues and help you gain greater attunement. It has nothing to do with following a plan. So back to honoring your hunger and feeling your fullness. So dieting takes away, for many of us, our felt sense of hunger. And because of this, sometimes it takes a while to get to understand your hunger. If you have not really felt your hunger in a long time, some of us may also be afraid of our fullness, because when we are full, we start to think that we should eat even more. It's actually quite counterintuitive. A lot of us who are on diets actually go through the restriction binge cycle, which I'm not going to talk about that much in this session, but I have talked about in previous sessions. Rejecting the food police and rejecting the diet mentality, foundations of intuitive eating. These are about avoiding food rules, avoiding outside rules about what you should eat, avoiding labeling foods as good and bad. I just had a client who talked to me about how she was following the nutrition label on a package of caramels. And she saw that on the nutrition label, it said she could have a serving size of 2 caramels. But when she was done with the second caramel, she really wanted another one. And I explained that one way to look at those nutrition labels, which by the way are controversial and strange, and there's a lot written about nutrition labels. But one of the ways in which I tell people to look at nutrition labels, it's as if it's kind of written in a different language that is none of your business. Look at that nutrition label and pretend it's some other language whose characters you don't know. Because this takes us away from our natural attunement. If you want a third caramel, take the goddamn third caramel because that's what your body wants. And restricting it is actually going to do the exact opposite. It's going to want to make you more. Restricting food, which is the essence of dieting, is counterintuitive. We think that restricting food is going to keep us wanting less food. But no, actually, 1,000 things happen in your body when you restrict food to make sure that you eat more food because your body does not want to starve. The last thing your body wants to do is have no food in it and be in constant overdrive. It's like this red light going off constantly that sends all these chemicals and hormones and messages to your brain that screams, I better get food. So yes, dieters crave food, and that's because they restrict. It doesn't have to do with the food. It has to do with the mindset and what you're doing with your body, essentially, and its relationship to food. All right, another element of intuitive eating that I think is foundational is making peace with food. Making peace with food is a tough one, and my clients have the most trouble with this concept because in diet culture, we are not given full, unconditional permission to eat whatever we want, because if we do that, we will get fat. In intuitive eating, when we first give ourselves full unconditional permission to eat whatever we want, whenever we want it, it is kind of like a dam that opens, because that's never been the case if you have been dieting. And I know it's scary. However, I can speak from experience and tell you that after a little bit of time, I'm not sure how much time, for everyone, it's different. After time, for me, it was about a year and a half, you start to lose interest in those foods that used to grab you and hold you because you know they will always be there. And instead, you have taught your body over time to listen to itself, and you are teaching your body to trust itself. If you have been a chronic dieter, however, this takes a while. I dieted for 30 years, 30 unsuccessfully. So it took me a while to incorporate this idea into my life. All right. And a lot of people are worried about this also, this unconditional permission to eat whenever you want, whatever you want, because it screams, oh no, you're going to gain weight. Yes, I gained weight. And then the job after you gain weight is to work on body neutrality, which is exactly what I did. All right. So the problem is not that your body is not equipped to lose weight. It's that your body has to do whatever it can do to stop starving. There's a distinction. Again, the goal in intuitive eating is to find satisfaction in food. My relationship with food now is neutral. I feel like doing a dance. It never was. I never had trust in myself around food. And actually, then it was a really lousy, unpleasant existence. Somehow I found intuitive eating 5 years ago. I had a fantastic coach like me guide me through the process. And I'm really proud to say that these noises, that loud stuff in my head is just gone. I want to talk about authoritative parenting. Transition to authoritative parenting, which I think is on page 5 in your workbook. So I'm going to first caution you and say that not every approach to parenting works for everyone, for every family. And if you have concerns about behaviors that you're starting to see with your children, definitely seek out a provider. I am not a mental health provider or medical doctor. I am going to refer to the work here when I talk about authoritative parenting. I'm going to refer to the work of Ginny Jones. Ginny Jones is an advocate and a coach for parents with who have children with eating disorders. I love the way she describes authoritative parenting. She says that there are 2 parts to authoritative parenting. The first part, the 2 parts are standards and support. Standards in authoritative parenting are the expectations we put in place around behavior. They include things like eating at the table, not hitting, doing chores, taking out the dog for a walk, brushing your teeth, doing your schoolwork. Those are standards. Support is the structure we put in place to make the standards achievable. This typically includes things like your monitoring, your encouragement, your guidance, and also professionals like me, like therapists, coaches, tutors. Ginny Jones says that our kids do best when they have a high combination of high standards and high support. So that is what we call authoritative parenting. Authoritative parents have high expectations for their children's behavior and provide the support and resources they need to succeed. They set clear rules and guidelines and explain the reasons behind their discipline. Authoritative parents are also nurturing and responsive, but they're not permissive or passive. They're emotionally literate, and they encourage communication to engage in difficult conversations about the standards and expectations that they've put in place. In my opinion, authoritative parenting works beautifully with the principles of intuitive eating. And you could probably figure out why before I even tell you why. I'm going to explain to you why, and then I'm going to tell you about an amazing model called DOR, the Division of Responsibility, which is Ellen Satter's model, Ellyn Satter's model. So the reason why authoritative parenting works well with intuitive eating is because authoritative parents establish structure, not control, around meals and snacks. Structure, not control. At meals, and snacks, they avoid harsh rules. They avoid food rules, and they reject diet culture messaging, which really limits the child's ability to tap into their hunger, fullness, and ultimately satisfaction cues. Authoritative parents are not the food police, yet there also is not a free-for-all all the time when it comes to food. Maybe sometimes, and maybe repeatedly, so that a child can understand what it might be like to have access to a ton of food so that they can identify the feeling in their body that may not be so good, and so that hopefully later they won't engage in that much eating. And sometimes this takes time, and this is also different for neurodivergent kids. All right. So Ellen Satter's division of responsibility, I just love this approach. It is controversial. I take what I like and I use it, and that's what I would suggest you do as well. So I think we're on page 6. Ellen Satter's division of responsibility, which is a couple of decades old, she says that your responsibility as a parent is to decide what food is available, when you will eat it, and where. And it's your child's responsibility to determine what they will eat and how much of what you provide. I'm pausing because that can be very scary, and that can feel like you might be out of control. But if you do this over and over and over again, your children start to understand that actually this is nourishment, that this is caring for them, and that you are providing the kind of environment that is conducive for them to tap into their bodies. Actually, what you're doing is you're trusting your child. You're trusting that your child will eat according to what their bodies need and want. Only that child knows what their body needs and wants. You are giving your child autonomy over what they eat. You can try to examine some of the fears around this idea that you have, and you can ask me some questions in a couple of minutes when I end. Also, in the division of responsibility, the attitude you take on when it comes to feeding your child is far more important than the actual foods. Pausing there. And that's because the attitude determines whether or not you are the food police, whether or not you are controlling, whether or not you're providing a supportive environment, a nourishing environment, an environment free of stress. Have you ever had something to eat in an environment that is stressful? Like, for instance, a really loud restaurant. I find that stressful. And I have trouble actually tapping into my body's natural cues in a loud restaurant because it's so like zapping of my sensory system. In the division of responsibility, your focus is on gentle nutrition and just the basic building blocks of nutrition, which I'm going to mention quickly, which are protein, carbs, and fats. In the division of responsibility, you are not assigning morality to food. You are avoiding labeling food as good or bad. You're not pressuring or threatening your children with food. Have this carrot and then I'll give you a lollipop. Don't hit your brother. If you hit your brother, you're not going to be able to have that brownie. You already had a cupcake. Are you sure you want another one? Well, now they definitely want another one because it's being restricted. You aren't overtly saying that in that incident that I just described, but you are because your attitude underneath the words is saying it. So an empowered eater, an empowered child who is a division of responsibility eater is an eater who receives nurturing support without feeling controlled, just like authoritative parents. There is a standard. The standard is meals and snacks. There are no food rules. That is part of the standards. And the support, like in authoritative parenting, is that they are allowed to eat as much as they want and what they want from what you've provided. I know you have questions. I can see it in your faces. I'm going to get to that in a moment. All right. I want to talk quickly about self-compassion in like the 1 minute we have. I feel that this is such a drastic shift from the ordinary way in which we eat in diet culture and in which we approach food, that I feel that creating an understanding in your head of how important self-compassion is critical. I follow Kristin Neff's work, who incorporates 3 ideas into self-compassion that actually I use and I find really useful. The 3 ideas are self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Self-kindness teaches us that we can be kind to ourselves just the way we're kind to a good friend or our children. You would never say to a friend, you know what, you suck. Your body is bad. You're bad and you're unworthy. In my coaching work, I see women who say these kinds of things to themselves hundreds of times a day. They feel they deserve this self-criticism. I challenge them to turn this self-criticism into self-kindness. This was me. I was doing this. Common humanity is the idea that suffering and imperfection are just a part of the human experience, that it's impossible to avoid suffering. Some of us suffer, yes, more than others, but this principle asks us to see ourselves as one of others and that we are imperfect. And the final principle that Kristin Neff employs that I love is mindfulness. And this is essentially just being aware of your thoughts, even if they're painful, and your emotions when they're difficult, and not over attaching them to them, not over identifying with them. That we want to avoid being taken over by these painful thoughts. Instead, we notice them, we're aware of them, they come, they go. We experience the rise of the emotion and the fall of the emotion. We don't judge them, we're just curious about them. We see these emotions, we notice them, but we don't become them. I want to talk about getting your spouse on board. Oh my God, I'm just going to continue for another minute. Getting your spouse on board might be the most difficult thing you do. You want to definitely start with modeling the behavior and know that your spouse's process for learning this will be different than yours. And it might take time to explain to your spouse what you're doing with intuitive eating, what sits well for you. You might want to suggest books and articles and podcasts. Give small pieces of information and let it sit and then continue. But model the behavior you want. If you are not doing the thing that you want your spouse and children to do, they're just not going to do it. The idea is to slowly incorporate these ideas and tools into your parenting toolkit. And also hire me as a coach. I can tell you that this is really difficult to do on your own, especially the giving yourself unconditional permission to eat part. It can really freak you out. It's like flexing a muscle you've never flexed before. All right, so this is the end. Thank you so much for listening. I want to just mention a couple of other things, which is that if you are local to South Orange and Maplewood, or even if you're not, my next, I have a Soma Adult School class that is starting on September 19th for 4 Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. And I will put the link in the chat. And also, I do run a local Facebook group with 2 other community members called Soma Body Liberation. I'll also put that in the chat. Highly recommend that you join that. We discuss all of this there. And finally, I do have monthly master classes just like this one, and my next one will be on Sunday, October 6th at 9 to 9:45, and we're going to be discussing how to develop body respect and body trust, not body love. So thank you all so much. And I'm going to put those links in the chat, and I welcome your questions. If you have any, you can unmute. Or even if you don't, we can hang out.
Like,
Hey, Phoebe.
sorry, my voice
Hi.
is still, I'm not feeling well.
Oh, who's talking? Alana?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
How do you, how do you, like with the start of the new school year, um, we're noticing our schedules are changing, and I try and offer a variety of food that's available all times to the kids. Um, how do you do the same thing when they're in school for so many hours a day? So I have one child who is now at school 12 to 14 hours a day, and we're having a really hard time with providing him a variety of food that makes him feel like he has enough food during the day. And although he's helping to pack his food bags for that day, I'm seeing that even in these 5 days or so, um, that he's saying this is this isn't I'm hungry, and um, I don't know what to do to give him that level of variety that he's used to when he's out of the house for that many hours a day. Like,
Yeah.
how, I'm packing his bag with him, but like, I don't know, is there a better way to do this? Like, I feel like I'm not giving him enough of what he needs wants to eat, but it's not necessarily what he wants. I just feel like there's that variety's not there when he's outside of the house, and it's hard. And I see it. He comes home, he's tired and cranky and hungry.
Yeah. Yeah. And how old is he?
14.
14. Okay. So what exactly happens when I'm going to ask you a couple of questions first so I can understand this some more. What exactly happens when you are packing his bag? Do you do it collaboratively, or, how much impact is he having on deciding what to put in the bag of food?
Um, Usually I ask him as I'm packing it, like I'll say, "Hey, I'm getting your food together for school for the day. Yeah, I'm putting um this, and this. Is that okay with you? Anything else you want me to throw in the bag? Here are some of the other options we have for snacky foods that would fit in the bag. I have some things in the refrigerator I could heat up for you. These are the three leftovers we have from the other nights. Would you like any of those?" And then he'll sometimes, he'll tell me what he wants from that. Then he'll come in and I'll say, why don't you look through everything and see if there's something else that you can add, and don't worry about packing too much food, because I'd rather you have more food than not enough. And so sometimes he'll grab a few extra things, but it seems like, I don't know, maybe if it's just part of getting into the routine and him understanding what he needs during the day, or me understanding how to help him to pack enough, um, where it seems that he is coming home unhappy. And I think it's, not entirely unhappy, just I think a lot of it has to do with him not having a variety of food that he is normally eating. Because we don't restrict like when they eat. So there's always grazing all day. And when you're out of the house for that long, it's very hard to graze.
Yeah, sure is. So, well, first of all, I mean, it sounds like you're doing an excellent job. And this is tough because packing food for a child for 14 hours, I mean, that might be like a huge cooler, especially a
Yeah,
kid who's active.
it, it is.
Yeah. So one of the things, just from a practical standpoint, is what you may want to do is just create a list of snacks and a list of meals,
Okay. That's
and
a good idea.
see if you can check off. You can even do it like on a Sunday or Saturday and check off for the week what you're going to pack from this list.
Oh,
I would also say that after 14 hours, any child is going to come home cranky
yeah, yeah. No, I know. It's just, I
and
think
hungry.
it is, I think a large portion of that is that it's not enough. I don't know. I don't think it's hitting all the areas of
Yeah.
where what he's used to. And but I think the list is a good idea. I just keep everything. I've been keeping everything out. I put a table out in the kitchen so that the food is not in the pantry. I put it out this week so that he could see it out, and at least the shelf stable stuff. um but I feel like he's not so quick to open the refrigerator and be like, "Oh, I'm going to grab mac and cheese," like. So I think a list, that's a good idea. If I
Mhm.
make a list. Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome. Okay. Phoebe, I think you.
Yeah, I wanted to say to Alana that first of all, I think you're very good if you don't if you tell him it's okay if he packs too much, because I think that's something I struggle with a little bit. Like I feel frustrated if my kids pack, more and then there's wasted food. Um I think it's like almost not really rational, but just like the food waste bothers me. Um um And I mean, I know we're not like really supposed to give suggestions to each other, but I wanted to ask if you would consider having him take charge of packing it, because then, yeah, maybe that would just help him figure out what doesn't work.
That's a
Look,
good idea too. Yeah, maybe try and stop helping and just let him do it.
Yeah, you could, and the
And I
list
worry
might
he's not
help.
going to have enough food, but he still doesn't have enough food. So I guess maybe that's good.
Well, what you can do if, you know, as authoritative parent, and by the way, Phoebe, you can absolutely give her advice, totally fine. But in authoritative parenting, so what you can do is, right, you're creating the standard. So you explain that, you know, you really do need a lot of food. Like fill up this bag. Maybe take 3 or 4 or 5 big meals and little snacks, because really humans need to eat about every 3 to 4 hours. And if he's, you know, working out or active, he needs more than that. So maybe he needs 5 meals in
Yeah.
that 14 hours with a sprinkling of snacks. So
Yeah.
you can just say that. All right, let's start off Monday and Tuesday with 5 meals and a sprinkling of 5 snacks. And just write them down and pick from column A snacks and column B. Let him put them in and see how
Okay.
he does.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a lot of, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
so I had wanted to ask if you can talk a little bit about how you handle, you know, outside inputs, because obviously, especially as our kids get into like the tween and teen years, there's what we've done at home, but there's also, you know, all the input they're getting from outside, what they're observing their friends doing as far as eating habits, and yeah, all the all the other noise from outside.
Yeah, do you have a specific example to share, or just like an overall?
Um, yeah, I could share a specific
Okay.
example. So my 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 daughter is a teen, and she has a friend who's I'm friends with her mom, and her mom um uh I would say really values appearance, and she has somehow agreed with her daughter. I don't know what the process was, that her daughter doesn't eat sugar or dairy products. And so we have for years gone to the beach together, and on the way home, we would get ice cream together. But now they won't join us for ice cream. So I think I've struggled a little with how to talk about that, you know, um, in a way that I mean, I think ideally what I would like to do is convey that I think that's a bad idea, but not kind of create, I guess, an uncomfortable dynamic by criticizing my friend, or I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So this is tough because yeah, you do influence your kid, but the outside influences are really loud at that age. I know because I have a 15 and 17-year-old. So one of the things, and I know what you mean about not wanting to like place emphasis on the rules, even though you don't agree with them, you kind of just don't want to bring attention to something that, you know, doesn't feel right, because then maybe the kid won't listen to you because you're being controlling or whatever it is. So one of the things I do is talk about myself, and maybe not in front of, you know, the friends, and not in the actual situation where, you know, you're deciding not to get ice cream, but maybe when you're together, you know, that after the trip or the next day. And even in passing, like I like to have hallway conversations, or like a pass the salt kind of thing. Like you can, you know, say, oh, can you pass the salt? Oh, by the way, that's just really bothers me that we didn't have ice cream, because I love ice cream at the end of the day. So that you're not really talking about, you know, the rule and how it impacts your child, but how it impacts you, and that it's completely acceptable to have a different way of, responding to that rule. And maybe that's when your daughter will say, yeah, that bothers me too. And then you're quiet. You listen. You leave space to listen. So that's like a really light way of approaching it. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think what I like about that is the leaving space to listen. I think that's really valuable advice.
Yeah. Look, there's so little we can control out there, unfortunately. I mean, I hate that, But what we can do is create the safest space possible in our home. And a lot of the time, when it comes to teenagers, it's about spending time with them and not saying much, maybe asking some questions, and spending time and just listening, because that's when the stuff, really starts to come out. So you want to get your daughter's take on this experience of being, with a friend who doesn't eat ice cream, and who has this rule, what her experience is with the rule. Is it hard for her? Does she think it's just, not something that she agrees with? What's her experience with it? But you're going to get there if it's, you give her an environment in which to respond to your questions or to talk about it that is neutral, that is free of distraction, that is quiet. Yeah, it's tough. Is that helpful?
To keep unmuting myself. Yes, that's very helpful. I think just, I have a lot of opinions about this, but just to think about how that's not really what I'm needing to convey. What I'm needing to convey is just that my kids have the opportunity to express how they feel.
Yeah, and you're going to eat ice cream. Now what I find is that my kids, we used to have rules in my house, and I used to have a lot of control, and I used to restrict and have conditions. I wasn't overtly saying you can't have this food at this time, but I was kind of saying it. And now that I'm not, and it took me a while to get there, years. Now that I'm not, there's a very clear understanding about kind of our experience in the house with food and how it is safe, and others where it just doesn't feel that way. And so it takes time. So they've I feel like internalized this idea that this works for me. But it took a lot of time to get there, like this repeated, reminder of, we don't need rules. There's no policing. Yeah. Do you feel like the mom or the kid is trying to indoctrinate or push these ideas onto you or your family or your daughter?
No, it's more just kind of being around that and what that impact is.
Yeah. Something tells me that it's not the only way in which they are controlling or restricting. There's probably other ways as well.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe there's a body type that, you tend to see. And so there's this whole package of, I've got to eat that way, control my food so that I can look that way. And your message at home is actually, we eat what we want. We listen to our bodies. And so again, I will say a lot of the time, it's just asking one question, spending time with the kid, and staying silent, even though you want to scream, ice cream is okay, scream it to your spouse. Scream it to, your pillow. But make sure they see that you care, but you're not making it a gigantic thing, because that's a thing for teenagers, like, see, you're me. Yeah, I've been there. Anybody else? Happy to answer any other questions. All right, I take it nobody else has any questions. Give you one more second to think. Sometimes you have to think. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. And I hope to see you on Sunday, October 6th at 9 o'clock for Developing Body Trust and Respect, Not Love. And sign up for my Soma Adult School class, which starts September 19th. And take a look at the Soma Body Liberation Facebook page. Thank you for coming. Take care.
Thank you, Limor.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Limor.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.